Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to LoFi History at the Northeast Georgia History Center. I'm Libba, and I'm here with Marie and Glen, our wonderful historians who are looking rather dapper as usual today. Now, if this is your first time to LoFi History, this is your chance to ask historians Glen and Marie your history questions. They've got a pretty big wheelhouse of things that they know. And if we don't know it, we're going to look it up together. So first, we'd like to talk about what they're wearing, though. And it seems like we've got at least a century apart, it seems. So why don't we start with Marie? Why don't we start with you today? You look like you're ready to go to the beach.
I am. I figured since this is our really first lo-fi history.
Oh, 1 second. I think our audio is I see what the problem is. 1 second, Marie, and we'll talk about your lovely outfit. All right, 1 second. And that should do it. Let's try that again, Marie.
So since this is our first lo-fi history of the summer season, I decided to wear my early 1900s bathing outfit, also known as a swimsuit.
Were they using swimsuit that early, or was it all bathing suit?
It was still considered a bathing costume.
A bathing costume.
So bathing costumes came about really in the 1860s. That's kind of the first time that you see them in illustrations in things such as Godey's Ladies Book or magazine. And then and they're still kind of like, oh, what is that? That is new. That is should I do that? And then by the time you get to the late 1800s, 1890s, early 1900s, they become fairly common. Like people understand what they are and are okay with wearing them.
It's not quite so unladylike to go swimming anymore.
Exactly. And also you start to see a little bit more of physical activity being encouraged as well for young ladies. Usually physical activities was discouraged for them.
I see. Now, is that just because... a lady should not be sweating and working and...
Well, I think it was more like they were scared that they would die.
They're just so frail and weak.
It's more of that.
I see.
Look, if you're going to faint when someone coughs too loud, you certainly don't need to be participating in strenuous physical activity.
Yes, that
which all ladies
did.
Obviously. That's why they had pieces of furniture dedicated to fainting.
Exactly.
Oh, my goodness.
All right,
we'll have to get into
some
that
house
later.
museums will tell you. Yes, but this is an early 1800s one. I actually decided to conduct a historical experiment and went swimming, like physically swimming at a beach in this. And you can actually do it, even though I am wearing I should stand up because that's the fun
let's see
part.
it.
I have a skirt on.
Oh, cute. I love it.
And
It does look really comfortable. Gotta be honest.
It actually is, because it also has like pants that go under it. So this is actually like all one piece, and there's pants under my skirt because like you can't.
What if
show
I saw
anything
your
under
ankle?
It. No, but see, I wear stockings and bathing shoes, so it's okay.
Okay.
You still don't show any leg.
Okay.
Or any skin on your leg, but you can show like your arms here. That's kind of the fun thing.
That's the tease.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, but they're still bathing costumes up until really like the 1910s.
Okay.
And then once you hit the 1920s, you have women getting the right to vote, more into the women's movement, and you actually see bathing suits look more like what we would consider like a one piece today.
Okay,
and that's
cool.
when you kind of see that transformation.
Actually, almost form-fitting, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's really, at that point, far more about going out and swimming, like kick, paddle, swimming, than going and just kind of splashing about in the waves.
But they're still wool.
Some of them were.
They remain to be. Now, they're not actually steel wool. They do make them out of wool.
Yes.
Because a steel wool bathing suit would be incredibly painful.
That would be very
That would
painful.
be
Yes.
not fun.
Sorry, that was
Now,
inaccurate and imprecise language on my part.
I don't know how accurate this is, but we do have that.
That's pretty good.
On my, let me Google that for you. I found this at least. So we have, so you see a bit more form-fitting by the later 20s or mid-20s, but I mean, that 1890s one, I mean, that looks like she busted out of jail and went to the beach or something.
It kind of does. Stripes were very popular, as you can even see up into 1927. Still have stripes. It's because stripes are very nautical. because you
right.
can
Makes
kind of,
sense.
because if someone falls overboard, you
Oh,
can see the
no.
stripes and the
Right.
waves.
I didn't
better.
realize that.
What if someone coughs loud and you faint while you're swimming?
Got to be able to see you.
gotta
Yes,
see 'em.
exactly.
Got to get that bathing horse and carriage to go out into the waves and
yeah,
fetch you.
right. Yeah.
But actually, no, they had like bathing houses and they would take it out like into the water, and then you would get out and like splash about, and then you would get back into the bathing carriage, and then the horses would pull you back to shore.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Now, this is for the super elite folks.
Yes.
This is not for peasants.
No. So that you could go take the waters. It was considered, a luxury
Yes.
spa health treatment.
That's cool. That's cool. I dig that.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn, are you dressed for a day at the beach, or where are you going in that outfit?
I'm just going around town, really.
Going to the market.
Yes, as those of you who have followed us for a while know, as I've said, that 18th century stuff is just my fallback. So I happen to have this in the office for something today, and I thought I would put it on. Just a cocked hat and a waistcoat with my linen shirt and my. Actually, they weren't calling them cravats at this point. I don't think they were neckerchiefs.
Neckerchiefs.
Not there were handkerchiefs and neckerchiefs.
Okay. Oh,
So,
that's fun.
Because one's for your neck and one is to wipe away the moist things.
All the moist things. Yeah.
I know I'm not supposed to say moist, but I just did. You're the one in a bathing suit.
Yeah. There you go.
I am. I bathing costume.
You stay, yes. So, I have to also I'm going to take over for a second and turn into an old man.
Okay,
so that
go
our
for it.
viewers can understand, because as Libba said, she just Googled that image for us. And you were talking about Godey's Ladies Book. So
Yes.
before I go on, tell people what Godey's Ladies Book was.
So it was a periodical magazine that would be printed out and then sent to your home, or you could buy it perhaps in a store.
Ooh.
Right, and it's a big thing. And I remember I first read about it when I was reading the Little House books.
Oh.
But what this means is this was in the way back in the 1980s, and I couldn't just hop onto my computer in my house and type in Godey's Ladies Book and find out what it was. This is back in the day, because I was like, ooh, what is that? And it wasn't in any of the reference books that I had in my 12-year-old library. So I had to go to the actual library in town
Whoa.
and research what a Godey's Ladies Book was.
And here
because
we
the
have
name,
a cover from 1867.
Ooh, nice.
yeah, and it's a cool book, but I didn't know what it was. So
Yeah.
so see, kids, how good you've got it nowadays.
You can just go on to Google and type things
you don't even have to know how to type. You can
Exactly.
just pluck away at the keyboard.
Or
Now
speak it into your phone.
Oh yeah, speak it into your look-at device. Yes.
Now, what kind of would this be? Sort of like, I mean, obviously it's for ladies, but what kind of information would it be like style and home?
Oh,
stuff,
it
or
basically
what?
is like the Better Home and Gardens of the mid 1800s.
Nice.
So it also contained things like stories,
Oh. Okay.
which I think is interesting. You kind of like would publish a chapter, a book or a chapter, a magazine. So then you would want to continue to read the magazine to see how the next chapter goes. They would also print sheet music. So the popular sheet music that you could then perform. Usually it was for piano or piano and voice. And when you think about it, that's what they had. You had to play music if you wanted to listen to it or have
Right.
someone else play it. So that was kind of like keeping up with the newest trends and songs and whatnot. They had kind of like not just styles. They had, of course, fashion plates, which would show you the styles. They also had some instructions on how to make smaller things like pen wipes or purses or like
Wait.
embroidery.
Pen wipes?
Well, when you're writing and you get a bunch of ink on your pen,
You have to.
you have to wipe your pen
How
off
about
because
that?
otherwise it dries and it clots and then you can't use it anymore.
Interesting.
But they didn't. But this is the thing. The assumption is that ladies, women, almost all would know how to sew. So they didn't put full patterns in the books. They just put like fashion plates and showed it from a couple of angles and assumed that the audience could figure it
know the
out
rest.
just from a picture. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And for some things they had more pattern-y things, but a lot of times it was just pictures and a few instructions.
Right.
And it was instructions for people who probably already have a very large backlog of knowledge.
Right.
That we would not consider general knowledge today.
Right. Yeah. Well, very cool.
Yes.
Well, excellent.
Yeah.
I see we've got our usual suspects here today. We
Hooray.
have hey Terry. Hello, Terry from Iowa. We've got Richard. Hey Richard.
Hey.
Alma and Gabby. Hello, Alma and Gabby.
Hello.
Excellent. And actually, I think that Alma and Gabby are going to start off our first question. But of course, any of our viewers, if you have never watched LoFi history before, then you can just go right ahead and chat your history question for Glenn or Marie, or both. And if we don't know it, we're going to investigate a little bit together, and it'll probably also give us a good idea for a program to do later.
Yep.
So
We sometimes guess. We
sometimes
never
guess.
lie or make up.
Exactly. So Alma says, good afternoon. I got to see the musical Hadestown over the weekend. So Gabby's question is, why is Greek mythology used so much in modern stories and other mythologies are not? She used the example of Egyptian gods and the Cain Chronicles, which I'm not familiar with, but she couldn't think of any other Egyptian god stories. So Glenn, this seems like a question for you, but I bet Marie, I'm sure you have something to say on this as well, but I know this is a particular interest of Glenn's. But why do you think that Greek mythology in particular has really been so pervasive in modern stories?
A few different reasons, of course. There's never any one singular answer to a question like that. But one of the big reasons is because Greek culture, history, religion are foundational elements for Western history, our culture and our literature. They were the first fully fleshed out that we consider Western literature, Western culture, and so we always go back to them, in effect, because they were first, right? They were the first and the earliest. That and you go through the ancient world, and you go through, and Rome borrows much of what is Greek.
And just changes its name a little bit. No one will notice.
So you have the Greeks and their culture and their mythology, which to them was a religion. Alexander takes that and spreads it all over the known world. Then the Romans get it, and then the Romans spread those stories and incorporate them into their own foundational myths and spread them all over the Mediterranean, the Roman world. So they are geographically and timeline-wise everywhere. Well, those texts are still saved through the Middle Ages in the monasteries. It's what monks copied to learn Greek and Latin.
Oh, right, yeah.
But then especially when you get into the early modern period, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, an education is going to include a huge amount of the classics. They're going to learn Greek and Latin because that is an important part of a real education. And so they're going to continue reading those texts. And that only stopped, in the early 20th century.
When you basically have public schools come in and they no longer teach Greek and Latin as part of core curriculum.
Okay, yeah.
It's more of a foreign, no one speaks necessarily. No one necessarily speaks Greek anymore, but you could have it as a foreign language.
Ancient Greek.
Ancient
Greek. Modern Greek.
Yes.
I'm
sorry, Latin.
Right,
When
yes.
you speak Latin, anymore. Latin. Yeah.
But yeah, so those are some of the reasons, and the stories that those mythologies have created continue to resonate because everything that came after, in some way, it may not be directly based on them, but it owes something to them. Mm-hmm. Those classic stories of not just Greek mythology, the stories of the gods and things, but also just the existence and struggles and interactions within the Greek city-states and the Hellenistic world, right? That's what we sort of look back to, and so much of our own modern language comes from the Greek.
And I would imagine that, with Greece being this, I don't know if it's the origin of democracy or a democratic process, but it's something we associate with that. So that's a little bit outside of the mythology, but does the mythology speak to those kind of ideals as well, or is that separate in your
I would
mind?
say that those ideals speak to the mythology. It's sort of the other way around.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason I have to stop and not go on is because I'm in the middle of a 36-part great courses audiobook on Athenian democracy.
Oh, how cool!
So what we should do, we should write down
Yes.
a subject of Athenian versus modern democracy.
I'm on it.
Because that it is a remarkably fascinating topic. And what's interesting is Greek democracy and Greek culture in its sense of itself is very similar to us here in the United States, and yet very different. And it's a remarkable thing. But I think you're right, Libba. I think too, especially the British very strongly had an affinity for the Greeks. They saw themselves as the Neo-Greeks. And the United States, to a lesser extent, but still a significant extent, sees itself as the inheritors of that Greek tradition.
And I recall, Marie.
Democratia.
Yes. Marie, I remember when you did your program on historic architecture, of residential architecture, you talked about how much there was like a Greek revival. So I mean, it even is in our architecture. Are there other things that come to mind where we see the role of Greek culture or Greek mythology? And maybe Marie, you could briefly just describe what those architectural pieces are that you see in America.
Yeah, so anything that has a what we call a temple front, which is basically that triangle pediment and then columns, is very much reminiscent of Greek architecture. And then if you see anything that is more rounded, like rounded arches, those are Roman arches. The Greeks didn't quite figure out how to make things round. They had not quite gotten up to that point yet. So if you see like large domes or rounded arches, that is also Romans and kind of reminiscent of Roman. That is an example of a Greek revival style house. That one doesn't necessarily have a temple front.
Now, would I say Roman revival architecture? For those domes?
No, that one's not necessarily a classification.
Yeah,
it's just Roman influence. You would technically call that more like neoclassical, because Roman is also considered to be one of the classics of architecture.
Yeah, well, I see a lot of these Greek revival houses in Athens, Georgia, in particular.
Athens was getting incredibly wealthy. About the same time, Greek revival architecture was also incredibly popular. Also, in other times that we see Greek influence is right after the French Revolution and also American Revolution in fashion. They kind of have this overthrowing of, the king and queen, and they want to have republics and democracies, and are very much looking back to ancient Greece and Rome, and therefore also very much trying to kind of dress like them as well, not like togas and whatnot. But there are some wraps that ladies wear that are very reminiscent of togas or chitons. So a lot of times people think that the Greeks wore togas. No, the Romans wore togas. The Greeks wore chitons.
Chitons.
Yes. But it's very loose, it's very flowing, not incredibly form-fitting, and we see those styles come back into fashion. Men's fashion is still, we see the invention of the three-piece suit, which has nothing to do with Rome or Greece, but their hairstyles is actually one of the famous styles in that early 1800s time period. Is called alatitis.
Now I don't know if this is what I found as far as that sort of like empire waist kind of thing. I don't know if the hair is what you're talking about.
No, because alatitis was mostly worn by men.
Oh, okay,
yes.
Okay. So
but this is very flowing. It's white because at this point, everyone thought that in ancient Greece and Rome, because of all of the marble statues, they're white because the paint has worn off. So they just thought everyone wore white.
Wow.
Right.
So you have a very not all dresses, of course, in that early 1800s were white, but white dresses were very popular because they were trying to emulate the stone carvings that they had, which were white.
That's fascinating. Well, now, when you say the alatitis, did you say?
Yes, alatitis.
Alatitis.
Hairstyle, and it's supposed to look like those the busts.
The distinguished Roman
Fun.
Yes.
Well, very cool. So Greek mythology, Greek culture, definitely throughout American culture. Now,
I was also thinking, even though Roman and mythology and Greek mythology, which are very similar, are very popular, but also Norse mythology is making quite a comeback with Marvel.
Oh, yeah, now it is. Yeah, right.
And the Northman.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
the Northman, which I have yet to see. I need to see that. I need to see it.
Y'all need to see that unless you're under the age of 18.
Right, yes.
Do not see
Maybe
it.
a bit gruesome or something else.
But yeah, so yeah, the Marvel stuff and, well, you know, a lot of, I'm working it in, Tolkien's work was based on a lot of those Germanic legends because that's the old Anglo-Saxon world, which is, all that stuff goes like this, right? The Scandinavian, the Anglo-Saxon world, pre-Christianization, those gods are the same as well. And now, the Egyptian gods, I think we have a fascination with Egyptian gods and mythology, but you're right, it's not as much as the Greek. I think it's more a fascination with something we still consider foreign and different because there's so many. I mean, there's a lot of Greek and Roman gods too, but they don't look like humans, right? Greek and Roman gods look like humans. The Egyptian gods do not.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yes, but it is. Marvel's bringing some of that back. There's always a fascination with it, but it doesn't seem. Egyptian stuff seems like the West looking in on something else rather than embracing it.
Now, I mean,
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. What I feel like I've heard about like a Victorian fascination with Egypt. What do you know about that, Marie?
Oh yes, so there was a whole Egypt mania basically. You could probably speak more to Napoleon's excursion into Egypt.
Yeah.
But it kind of started with that, and then just continued on into the finding of King Tut. But if you want to start with Napoleon.
Yeah, so Napoleon, this is the thing about Napoleon. He's a complex guy, and when he takes an expedition to take Egypt from whoever, including the Brits, he takes along a body of scholars and archaeologists with him to study Egypt because, again, they're sort of fascinated with it. We've always been fascinated with it. Herodotus, the first historian, Greek historian, in his book, wrote about his fascination with the Egyptian culture, and he mentions the pyramids, and he doesn't quite know about it. He can't figure it out, but he's writing everything he can because they're fascinated with it. We continue to be fascinated with it. Napoleon takes his guys, they study the Sphinx, they study the pyramids, and they find the Rosetta Stone, which has
that's very important. Yes,
it has Greek hieroglyphs and what's the third one? Not cuneiform. Or is it cuneiform?
Let me see.
No, it's not cuneiform.
I'll look it up real quick.
I'm not sure if we've still figured that one out.
Maybe, yeah, it's ancient Greek. Maybe it's hieratic and hieroglyphs.
Oh, that would make sense.
I think it's Greek, hieratic, and hieroglyphs are on this stone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah, Greek, something demotic? Is that?
Demotic, yes.
Demotic? Yeah, and hieroglyphic, yeah, and Greek.
That's a later Egyptian writing style. Anyway. So they find this, and this is how they begin to be able, and it takes them years, decades, once they get this thing back to Paris, but they do eventually figure out how to read hieroglyphs. And once they figure that out, this whole world opens up, and then as you move forward into that Victorian era, it becomes much more accessible, right? They can read about it, and they have methods to reproduce mezzotints and engravings and things that can be distributed widely.
Mezzotints? What is that?
It's a kind of illustration that can be mass produced, but it's still a little expensive. But it adds color. It's not it's not full color.
Yeah.
But it adds some color to what would be just like an engraving or a woodcut or something on the page.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then it just continues on, and you also get the exotic, what they call the exotic revival in architecture, which has a lot of Egyptian influence. When you think about the Washington Monument, which took forever to build, but it's an obelisk.
Right.
And that's an Egyptian shape.
cool.
Any obelisks that you see a lot of them in graveyards. You see a lot of them as monuments. That's the Egyptians use them as monuments.
Right.
And that's one of the, I think, the huge crossovers that we don't even process necessarily of that fascination with Egypt that a lot of people in America have had. And then it just continues. The Victorians at some point drank like mummy tea because they thought it was beneficial to their health.
And cool.
I still can't get over
all the
it.
crazy rich kids are doing it.
All the crazy rich
I'm gonna pass
kids
on
are
the
drinking
mummy
tea. I think it's so weird, and
Wow.
also is a reason why we, I guess, don't have as many mummies as we probably
so.
should have.
Victorians.
Well,
They
the
do some
Victorians
crazy
saved
stuff.
a lot.
That's
They
true.
did.
Oh,
I become one of those
Because
apologists.
The Victorians are basically the people who started museums.
Well, good job, Victorians.
And,
Good
you know, tying it all back together, the Elgin marbles from the Parthenon
Yeah.
were these beautiful carved decorations that were originally in the Parthenon, and Lord Elgin bought them from the Turks.
According to Lord Elgin.
Well, no, he has receipts.
Oh, okay.
And the Turks the Ottomans had been in control of that area of Greece for 400 years. So by every legal and international right, they were in control of that land. They sold the marbles to Lord Elgin. Lord Elgin brings them back to England. He sells them to the British Museum at a loss.
Oh.
And there they sit to this day. And there is a huge controversy over whether those should go back. It is a complicated issue, and I would argue there is no clear-cut solution politically, economically, morally, because there are a lot of things. But it's one of those issues that places like the British Museum, because the Victorians did go get all this stuff.
And then brought it back to
They
the British
brought it
Museum.
back. They saved it from, deterioration and theft and arson and everything else. So,
yeah, that is
who knows?
tricky,
I mean,
yeah.
it is a fascinating topic, and you can
Write that down.
write that one down. And if y'all want to do some research on it, it's
It's interesting to read.
Yeah.
There's a lot of articles.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you, Alma and Gabby. That was probably the longest answer we've ever given. But
Was that just one question?
But that was just
was
one
one
question. That was our very. And of course, anyone who's joining us, if you've just joined us, go ahead and chat your questions. Really, any question is up for grabs. We tend to focus on things basically like before the Vietnam War is kind of like generally the period. And I don't know how much we get into
We don't talk about anything that happened after I was born.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's not history yet.
That's right.
But Alma and Gabby also said that Gabby had a Decades Day for Spirit Week at school
fun.
last week, and she asked for a 1920s dress and put her sunglasses with it. Oh, man.
Nice.
We would love, if you want to share a picture with
Yes.
us, we would love to see Gabby in her 1920s dress. That's awesome. Very cool. Now, our next question comes from Richard, and this is a great one. Richard says, I always wanted to know why the English colonies were small in area but dense in population, while the French and Spanish colonies had vast territory but sparse population. I had never even connected those dots. So, is there a specific reason for that? What are our
There sure
assumptions?
is. That's the first two classes of my survey course.
All right, well, let's.
All right, buckle in, everybody.
Yeah, buckle in. Let's.
Let's beat the last for a long answer.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
yes. No, I won't do that. Let's see. Let me gather my thoughts and sum this up.
Take this thought and this.
So the New World. There are three major European nations that go into the New World to take it. Spain is first on the scene. They go into Central and South America and begin to ease their way along the Gulf Coast. But they come in first. They are looking for their purpose is threefold: God, gold, and glory. Right? They are spreading the Catholic religion. They have found a massive amount of wealth in the form of gold and silver, actual, easy to get rich quicks, hunks of metal that they can then export to Spain. And they are looking for glory because that's what the Spaniards do. And so they get there first. And that's what they're focused on, is wealth extraction, precious metal extraction. and they only put enough colonies and people in to get that done and to spread Catholicism, missionary work. That's sort of it. France comes in next. France comes in and realizes we're too late to the precious mineral bearing areas. We're going to go a little further north, look at some ways we can interact with the people who are already there. There's a huge market in Europe for furs and pelts, deerskin, badgers, beavers, all those sorts of things. That's how France begins to build its wealth. It has the local population do all the work, much less enslaved than the Spanish made the native population. They just say, come back here in 6 months, bring all the pelts you can, and we will trade you whatever you want. So France sets that up. France, again, you don't need a lot of people for that. You need people around the coast. You need people to interact with the Indians to sort of process it once they bring it, get it on the ships, take it back to the mother country. England comes much later than these other two guys, and there is no easy way to begin extracting wealth. In effect, England gets the leftovers, right? That boring part, that's sort of what we consider the Atlantic seaboard now. The natives are not that keen. It's not the pelt gathering season is not that long. There is no precious minerals to extract, at least not easily. And so England says, well, how can we make this work for us? So England begins to look at very small things like tobacco. Well, tobacco's a crop we can make some money with, and they focus on that. But what England starts to do is export. Instead of importing things from the New World, England is exporting England. Their goal quickly becomes to make small Englands everywhere its colonies are. Spain and France aren't doing that. They're extracting stuff. England is exporting Britishness and people, and for that you need people, you need to get land, you need to have women, and you need to begin having families come. And so as that happens, you get a much larger population coming into the area, and they're using agricultural means primarily to expand their wealth. Agricultural and natural stores for naval, timbers and tar and pitch and tobacco and rice and indigo and things like that. That requires people. That's also, they begin to bring in slaves to do this work eventually, but that's why, in a nutshell, England's colonies become much more densely populated. But what that means is, in the long run, they win. They win the New World because of the demographic realities. On the eve of the French and Indian War, I can't remember the exact figures. There are about 40,000, no, there's about 70,000 Frenchmen in New France in Canada. And there's a slightly over 1 million English people in the English colonies. Oh, wow. It's a matter of demographics, right? Yeah. It just is. And so that is what leads this huge population density on the part of the English colonies as opposed to the French and even the Spanish. The Spanish do start densifying their colonial efforts, but they do that in Central America around where their initial wealth extraction operations were, in Mexico and in those areas. But England, they exported people, they exported Little Englands. And that means that all that English culture, religion, political thought, just how men and women interact with one another, how business works, how credit works, how money works, became the 13 colonies.
Wow. Yeah, that totally makes sense. They had different agendas.
Yeah, exactly. All the countries. Entirely. And again, this is a generalization, sure, but it's a pretty close generalization.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question, Richard. That was a really good one. I like that a lot. And of course, if you have any questions, do go ahead and chat those. In the meantime, while we wait for our next question, I did want to say that we have a really cool program, especially for any Downton Abbey fans. Tomorrow, Marie is hosting a historian's look at Downton Abbey, A New Era. So, Marie, do you want to give us a little bit of a teaser as to what this program is going to be about? And by the way, this is going to be tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it later anytime on our Facebook or YouTube channel. And this is free to the public, this one. So, what are we going to learn tomorrow, Marie?
Yes, so in Downton Abbey: A New Era, there are kind of two storylines that go about. And one is that there is a movie.
No spoilers.
This is literally the movie poster.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
for our audiences and especially for my sake.
Okay.
More important.
Because if I need to go like this, just let me know.
I will.
Yes,
I will
yes.
let you know.
Okay.
But no, this is literally in the trailer and
Okay.
on the movie poster.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
So on the top, you see there's, Mary and the Dowager Countess and others from the house, and they are surrounded by movie stars and movie equipment because a movie is supposed to be made at Downton Abbey.
Oh, dear.
Oh no, how scandalous.
Yeah.
But also they're being paid a large amount of money for that.
Oh,
So
dear. That's wonderful.
they also would like a new roof for Downton.
Oh.
So we kind of look, I do a kind of a background into what was going on with movies at the time that this movie was being made. It's an interesting time period because it's the 1920s.
Okay.
You have the late 20s. So you have the introduction of sound and all of that. So what's going on, especially with British movies, because a lot of times we focus on Hollywood, which of course was still the center, but we look a little bit more at Britain, a smidge, but Hollywood as well. And then the second basically storyline is half of the family going to the French Riviera. So we go, what is the French Riviera? And we look into what exactly that is, how it became this glamorous thing in the movie. They kind of talk about, they actually mention F. Scott Fitzgerald by name. So we see, what does F. Scott Fitzgerald have to do with the French Riviera, and kind of basically what I call these like throwaway lines or like setting up lines that give more historical context that I don't think anybody but like historians like really grasp and understand how wonderful the writing is. Basically I take a few of those lines and then I make a whole program out of it to give you even more context for Downton Abbey.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to that one. I got to see snippets as Guado was editing it, and even having not seen Downton Abbey, at least like I was still really interested.
Yes. And I try not to go into any too many spoilers. I probably give a little bit too much plot if you haven't seen it and like really want to see it and be totally surprised. But I try not to do any terrible spoilers.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah. But overall, you really enjoed the movie too, Marie?
Oh, I loved it. It was a
Awesome.
fantastic movie.
Sweet.
And I hope they do another one.
We're supposed
I also talk about what I think would happen in the next one.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
But also without trying to give away too many spoilers.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because
Just because of time period,
as you say, they're filming a movie at Downton because they need to pay for a new roof.
Yeah.
Which is sort of cheating because that's the entire plot of the real life Highclere
No, it's
Castle,
so meta.
only put
really?
into the 1920s.
Yes.
What? Oh,
No, the entire
tell me,
time
what?
it's so meta and it's so funny.
Oh, so you talk about that in tomorrow's program?
Yes,
Yeah, okay,
because
then I'll save it
because
for
they
that.
make so many like funny comments about like, oh no, actors at Downton, and like they are actors at Downton
That's
complaining
great.
about actors at Downton, and it's so like it's just so funny.
Yeah, I love that. And we also have another very cool program coming up this Friday that Glenn will be hosting for our members. And of course, if you are not a member yet, we highly encourage you to become one. It's a great way to support the History Center and very affordable as well. Only $5 a month or $45 a year will get you weekly history programs produced by us. And our next one is going to be a historic demonstration. Glenn's going to be demonstrating land surveying in the 1800s. And Glenn, for folks who may not even be familiar with what land surveying involves, give us a little bit of an introduction to what we're going to learn on Friday.
Yeah, sure. So for the record, this is going to be the early 1800s because in this area, that's when it becomes very interesting. Land surveying is the method by which you chop up pieces of land legally, represent them on paper in a map or a deed or using words, and then register that piece of paper to make a particular person the titled owner of the land, right? Every one of you who lives on a piece of property or who has bought or sold land or even is in a home at some point, the piece of property you live on was surveyed at least once, probably many, many times. And so surveying is the process by which someone actually goes out physically on the piece of property and measures it out. Now, that means there's also some geography that happens, and sometimes there can be, you're making a deed or a plat, which is the line drawing on a piece of paper of the property, but sometimes that can extend into map making depending upon who's doing what and who's paying who. But we're going to look at the instrumentation, some of the math. I'm sorry, we're going to do math for history, but some of the math involved, some of the processes, because this really ties in closely, especially to Georgia history, because of Cherokee removal and the cession of all the different Native American lands that came into Georgia, and how surveyors went in there, divided it up, and then set it loose in land lotteries.
I'm also fascinated to just see the equipment and tools as well. So that's going to be demonstrated by Glenn this Friday. And again, you can become a digital member of the Northeast Georgia History Center. I'll throw the link in the chat to become a member. And we've got a lot of really awesome programs already this season that you can... as a digital member, you have access to all of our seasons since we began it in 2020. So I think we might be close to 100 programs. I'll have to double check, but we've done quite a lot, and it's been awesome. Another cool thing we have coming up for our young historians. If you know a young historian ages 8 through 12 in Hall County or driving distance, then we have a Discover Georgia History Day Camp that's happening on June 17th. This is going to be super fun. We're going to be meeting James Oglethorpe, Mary Musgrove. We have an excavation station. We're going to be learning about oral history, scavenger hunt of the museum exhibits. It's going to be super fun. This is a one-day event, and registration is still open until June 10th. So if you go to our website, you'll see the tab for summer camps there. Another really cool thing we have, this is next week, and if you're in the area, highly recommend checking out our Summer Chautauqua series. We actually have 3 performances coming up, and the first one is going to be a historic character portrayal of Sidney Lanier. We're celebrating Southern Writers this season of Chautauqua, and we're going to have Kevin Moxley, professional actor and living history interpreter Kevin Moxley, portray Sidney Lanier. And I really am excited about this because he's also going to be reciting some of Sidney Lanier's poetry, which is just beautiful and is specifically about the Northeast Georgia region in many cases. Okay, last but not least, we also have a virtual summer camp for any of our young historians ages 8 through 12. If you know a kid who would be interested in learning about the American Revolution, we have historic character portrayals, historic crafts, recipes that you get to make from home, and activities led by our historian, Marie. And this is going to be super fun. Registration's still open, and this is June 27th through July 1st. So just wanted to throw those out there. Of course, all of this information is available at our website. Just search Northeast Georgia History Center, and we'll pop right up. So I think that's all the exciting things. I'm sure there's many more exciting things coming up. Isn't that enough? Yeah. Oh, I see Aquafunk is here on Twitch. Hey, Aquafunk, thanks for joining us. Aquafunk says, surveying before GPS, cool.
That's right. Yeah. It took a lot longer and required... It's funny because my brother is a modern surveyor.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
And so, but he loves the history part, and so he and I talk about that. And nowadays, everything's lasers, everything's GPS. Mm-hmm. He's even got a drone. His the company he works for bought this drone that costs several $1,000s, and he had to take like a week course. WEEK. I'm doing that a lot today. I'm being imprecise in my language.
Oh, no worries.
But he'll drive just by himself. He'll drive to the site. He'll get the drone out. He'll set it up, push a button. The drone will go up. He'll push a button, another button, and the drone will go and like take pictures and do all their measurements. He'll push a button. The drone will land itself. He'll put it back in the truck and he'll drive away.
Wow.
3 acres surveyed in the course of about 10 minutes from a flying machine
Innovation,
robot
y'all.
drone.
That's pretty amazing. I can't imagine what a surveyor of the 19th century
it.
They would be magic, basically.
It would be witchcraft.
Yeah.
Sorcery is what it
Yeah,
would be.
right.
But yeah, so it's really neat to because he knows surveying, and he could, and we've talked about this. He could go out and do one with old instruments because he's looked into it that much, but I can never get him to go with me and do it. He says it's too much work.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Oh no, that's super cool, and we'll learn more about that this Friday. And so I'm going to go to some questions that we've had in the queue that we haven't gotten to before. So, but of course, in our last 10 minutes or so, if anyone has a question they want to throw our way, you are more than welcome to. One question we never got around to was, how has the role of the vice president changed over time? And I'm pretty interested in this one as well. Glenn, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, it's the vice president is interesting. John Adams was the first one, and he sort of set the precedent. And every vice president I've heard talk to about this agrees with John Adams, that basically said there has never been a more basically, I'm paraphrasing, a pointless and miserable position than that of Vice President of the United States.
Oh.
Because they are not included in anything, right? What do they do? They basically sit around for someone to die. They sit in the Senate, they're President Pro Tem of the Senate, but they're not allowed to actually do or say anything except cast a vote in the case of a tie. Other than that, they just have to be there.
Now, was this how, like, when it was decided there should be a vice president? I mean, that was basically the reason. We just need someone to succeed.
And it makes sense. So yeah, parliamentary procedure for a president or a someone who presides. There's always a person there who can fill in case they're sick. The president of the United States is a little different because he is the head of state, and the Constitution had to find a way that someone could step in if that head of state became incapacitated or unable to carry out their duties. And so you have to have this person. So, it literally, and people have described it this way, it literally is almost a nobody who is a heartbeat away from the most powerful position now on earth.
Now, why not have the vice president serve in a more active capacity? Is there a reason that it's sort of a more hands-off? Yes, Marie.
So one of the things about that is the election of the vice president has changed over time.
It has.
Because it used to just be the second place in the election.
That fascinates me.
got elected to be the president, in the presidential election. So basically, okay, you didn't get elected president. You wanted to be president, but you weren't. But you were second place. So now you get to be vice president, even though you might have just said the most horrible things.
Yes,
yeah.
Marie and I run for president. But we turn out not to like each other because we're running against each other.
And in debates, we say things.
Marie's now elected president. And now I'm her vice president. And we're supposed to work together.
How long did that
last? So maybe that's why they just...
That only lasted the first one. They changed it after Madison? Monroe.
It was pretty early.
It was early.
Yeah.
It was
People didn't like it.
There were only about 5 or 6 presidents before they said no. We're going to put the president and the vice president on respective tickets.
Now, did that require some kind of change in law?
It was a constitutional amendment.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah.
So that might be one reason why at the beginning, when they were kind of, trying to basically feel out these roles and also kind of assign people roles, that perhaps the vice president didn't get assigned much to do.
Right.
Wow.
Because they were second place.
They were second place. They didn't the other person probably didn't like to work with them all that much. They had different views.
They're not, and Washington did this to Adams. He did not consider Adams part of his cabinet. So Adams didn't even get to go to cabinet meetings with Washington, and very frequently. The president, even with the vice president they choose, sometimes, depending upon the president, historically, they've kept the vice president in the dark about a lot of things. They've sort of put them to the side. Truman didn't know about the atomic bomb until FDR died, and he was named president. He's like, oh, by the way, please come over here. We need to tell you about a few things.
Yikes.
Well, I guess I've seen like the role of the vice president has been like diplomatic in many ways. It's sort of been like you act as a representative of the United States. I mean, was that the case early on as well, or what was it, Madison you said that was the first one?
No, Adams was the first
sorry.
vice president. No,
Right,
it was Madison. I wish I could remember. I feel bad. When they had the amendment passed that changed it.
But yeah, like early on, was it still like someone who would go to places and be the fancy vice president?
In effect, well, as Adams, I'm sure, would put it, that means that he would just fetch and carry for the president, right? He doesn't actually get to set or make or is even involved in the policy. He just had, the president will say, we have decided to do this thing. Go tell that person or that organization that we are doing this thing, and then come right back.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Well,
now, what's interesting is before all this changed, of course, John Adams becomes the second president of the United States. His vice president is Thomas Jefferson. They had been very, very close friends before this. The election of 1800, well, this first election that they had, Jefferson and Adams start to see their view of the course of the country is very, very different.
Oh, okay.
And so you literally have in this case, the vice president secretly negotiating with the French, trying to undermine what the president and his Secretary of State are talking to the French about. I love Mr. J, but he literally did that.
Yeah.
He's like, just ignore him.
Right.
We're close to the election. Just tell him what you want. You don't have to do what he says. And when I'm president, it will be different. Yeah, that's the other reason they changed them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So,
well, who would you like? Is there a vice president that has really stood out in that role specifically? Not really one who has
I
been.
feel like there's a lot that have come out of that role.
Right, right.
They used to be. This information is several presidencies old, but I think at one point someone said, if you become vice president, you have a 25% chance through death or through simply becoming your party's next nominee or what have you of becoming president. Back in the early republic, the gateway to the presidency was the Secretary of State.
Oh.
But starting, Marie, late 1800s, early 1900s, the pathway to the presidency has become the vice president.
Now, why was it the Secretary of State?
Because that person was appointed by the president with the advice and consent of the Senate as someone who was competent and who played a major role in the government. Early on, remember, the vice president was second place.
Got it. Yeah.
But once that constitutional amendment comes in, and once party politics really start to take off a little bit before the Civil War, but especially after the Civil War. Vice presidents become sort of that, because you're choosing your vice presidential running mate for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. They may bring a state with a lot of electoral votes. They may be someone who's very popular. They might even be someone who's competent.
Hopefully.
Maybe. But yeah, vice presidents it's an interesting thing.
I dig it. Worthy of an entire program, do you think?
We could go through some of the vice presidential highlights.
Yes. The highlight reel of vice
yes,
president.
There you go. All right, so we got about 5 minutes left. If anybody has a last-minute question, go ahead and chat that. But I've got another question from our queue that we didn't get to in a previous program. Oh, where was it? What was it about? Hold on. Oh, yes. This is so we're kind of talking about founding fathers. The question is, what did the founding fathers disagree about most?
A lot of things.
A lot of things.
I don't want to get too political, but in very recent time, in the modern era, we tend to say, well, the founding fathers, this and that.
Yeah.
They couldn't get along to save their life. The fact that independence was declared, they came together long enough to win independence, and the fact that they made a constitution is a bloomin' miracle. There was eventual consensus amongst them. But getting to that consensus, they fought like cats and dogs.
Now,
about
is this
a lot
just
of
what I would
things.
imagine as just like these men in a room, just like how was it like logistically debated? Did they each have their time to say something? I mean, how?
Yeah, I mean, it was, well, until later on, until you get slavery becoming the central issue. When they're making the Constitution, when they're in the Continental Congress, they are, I'm touching things, they are civil. They
Okay.
are rational. They're not trying to hit each other. They may raise their voices to make a certain point. Rarely did these folks shout each other down, but where they would really get nasty is writing things and having them published in newspapers or pamphlets.
Ooh, I
Yes.
see.
Or excuse me, having someone else do it for them.
Or
cool.
under
There's-
a
that
fake
is
name.
that is beneath
Yeah.
them. It is
Under a
beneath
fake
me
name.
to publish this. Please go publish this.
But
So-
if you do it,
Yes, it's
not
different.
me.
Oh well, I happen to agree with
Interesting.
that.
So, Marie,
Yeah.
when you say fake name, so it's as if someone is stating this opinion, but not on behalf of someone else, but just like so they don't have to be at blame, so they can remain anonymous and not have someone come after them for their opinion.
Not even
or
anonymous, just above it all.
Above it all, I
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
But they disagreed about. I mean, you look at the Constitutional Convention; they were disagreeing about how the president should be elected, what the power should be,
How that should be divided.
how-
The power should be divided. Should every state have the same amount of votes? Should they have representation equal to the amount of they vote? And then everyone was very mad at Virginia because Virginia is huge.
who is a citizen going to be? How is that going to be decided?
Are these arguments like are they documented? I mean, you mentioned like news articles and everything, but like were these varying opinions documented in some way?
So, taking the Constitutional Convention as the example,
Yeah.
that was supposed to be a super secret meeting.
Uh-huh.
If that happened today, it would be called behind the doors backstabbing meetings. It was because they knew what they were about to do was not going to go over well. So they were forbidden from writing letters to friends about it, from discussing the business with anyone. What we really know about that is because James Madison kept copious notes, even though he wasn't supposed to. He kept
Interesting.
copious notes. The best book about this is called Miracle in Philadelphia. And it is very well written. It is not it's academic quality, but it's not an academic work. It is very accessible, and it tells the story of all these different disagreements. And it's interesting because there were people who would be arguing for something right up until the point of ratification, and then suddenly they're like, you know what? I'm realizing that whole thing is a bad idea. I'm not going to vote for that.
Oh wow, that's fascinating.
That
sounds like a great program, too.
folks, and they started dividing up into, the smaller states wanted totally equal representation, and it's
Right.
but that's an example. There were plenty of instances after the republic, after the nation was formed from the Constitution, after the government was formed, those early congressional meetings and records, man, there was some highly contested difference of opinions in those things.
That sounds like a great thing to dive into an actual program. I'm particularly curious about those notes by James Madison.
Now, so Miracle in Philadelphia is the book. His notes have been published. They've been
cool.
preserved, and you can buy. You just go to Google again or
Yeah.
Amazon, and you can get a book that's just his notes.
Yeah.
And you can get the raw, unadulterated primary source.
Nice.
Nice.
Very cool. Well, we are at 5:30. Thank you so much for your questions today and for joining us. And anyone who's watching later, hope you enjoyed today's program as well. You can always message us questions as well if you'd like on our Facebook Messenger, or if you want to send us an email, just go to our website. And again, I did want to tout, you can also become a digital member for only $5 a month or $45 a year for weekly digital programs, which is super fun. We really enjoy creating these programs for y'all, and these conversations help us think of program ideas. We want to know what you're curious about, because we are going to be curious about it too. And by the way, we also, I'm in the midst of revamping our YouTube channel, but if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see that our past programs are now categorized, and they're easier to find. So do check that out. And if you haven't caught up with all of our programs, you can still watch those. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're going to see you again for LoFi History next month. LoFi History takes place on the first Tuesday of every month, and so we're going to be back on, we'll see if we're back on July 5th.
That's right.
We'll see how vacation plans pan out, but
we may have an independence hangover.
That's right, yes. Come have an independence hangover with the History Center, yeah. All right, y'all, this was super fun today, and we look forward to seeing you next time or in the chat for perhaps tomorrow's Downton Abbey program at 2 p.m. All right, see ya. Bye.